If you spend enough time in the quiet, affluent corners of the world, you begin to notice a peculiar kind of stillness. It is not the peace of a sleeping forest or a deserted beach, but rather the highly engineered silence of a premium lounge. In the harbors of Monaco, the private terminals of Zurich, or the shaded residential enclaves of Singapore, there is very little noise. Money used to talk, and wealth used to whisper, but today, the truly vast fortunes of the world are practicing a form of absolute silence. They are moving, but they are doing so without leaving a footprint. For decades, we have been trained to measure the health of the world by looking at the visible markers. We watch stock tickers, we analyze employment data, and we debate the rise and fall of interest rates. We assume that the global financial system is a shared architecture, a single ocean where the same tides lift or lower all boats. But if you look closely at the edges of this map, you realize that the water is behaving strangely. A quiet, steady drain has been opened, and the deepest reservoirs of capital are slowly, methodically flowing out of the traditional basins. This is not a panic. Panic is loud, messy, and desperate. What we are witnessing is something entirely different. It is a migration driven by a cold, mathematical calculation. It is the emergence of what can only be called the invisible standard. In the past, wealth was anchored by physical reality. A family fortune was tied to a specific piece of land, a factory, a mine, or a historic family seat in a specific nation. To be wealthy was to be a pillar of a particular community, bound to its laws, its culture, and its destiny. But over the last 20 years, that anchor has been quietly cut. The modern sovereign state is increasingly viewed by the global elite not as a homeland, but as a utility company. You pay your bill, and in return, you expect a certain level of service, safety, infrastructure, and stability. But what happens when the utility company begins to default on its promises? What happens when the cost of the subscription rises, while the quality of the service deteriorates? In the eyes of the mobile class, the rational response is not to protest, vote, or try to fix the system. The rational response is to change providers. This realization has birthed a massive, silent industry. Across the globe, boutique law firms, private banks, and specialized consultants are quietly redrawing the borders of human geography. They do not sell investments. They sell redundancy. They deal in the currency of golden visas, citizenship by investment, offshore trusts, and private jurisdictional structures. A wealthy individual from Western Europe or North America no longer simply holds a passport and a bank account. They hold an array of options. They are citizens of 3 different jurisdictions, residents of a 4th, and their assets are legally housed in a 5th, shielded by structures that exist in the gaps between international treaties. This is where the invisible standard begins to reveal itself. The standard is no longer about how much money you possess, but how easily you can sever your connection to any single point on the globe. True security is measured by your level of friction. If a government decides to raise taxes, implement wealth levies, or restrict civil liberties, the person who conforms to the invisible standard does not need to fight. They simply press a button, pack a single suitcase, and activate a pre-engineered contingency plan. But as we watch this parallel network of secure nodes grow, a more unsettling truth begins to take shape. The nation-state as an idea was built on a simple contract. The citizens contribute to the collective good, and the state protects the citizens. It was a closed loop. But the invisible standard has punctured this loop. The ultra-wealthy are opting out of the collective risk, while retaining all the benefits of global commerce. They can generate wealth in one country, store it in another, and enjoy their lives in a third, all while bearing none of the long-term societal liabilities of any of them. This leaves the rest of the population behind in a very different reality. The national debts accumulated by major economies over the past few decades are historic and unsustainable. The cost of aging populations, failing infrastructure, and climate adaptation is looming. And because the most mobile capital has already migrated into the ether, the burden of paying these debts must inevitably fall on those who cannot leave. The middle and working classes are becoming the captive audience of the nation-state, locked into a system where they must pay higher prices for diminishing returns, funding the very infrastructure that the migratory class uses to extract value. When you look at the world through this lens, the grand narratives of politics and ideology begin to fade. The real division is no longer between left and right or east and west. The real division is between the mobile and the stationary. It is between those who are bound to the geography of their birth and those who have elevated themselves into a borderless, sovereign free plane of existence. The quiet migration is not just a trend. It is the slow, peaceful secession of the top tier of humanity from the rest of the species. Let us return for a moment to the ordinary world. Think of the street where you live, the local shops, the taxes you pay, the passport in your drawer. It all feels incredibly permanent. We walk through our cities assuming that the buildings, the institutions, and the social fabric will remain intact simply because they have always been there. We trust that the rules of the game are the same for everyone who walks these streets. But if the people who build, fund, and steer the global economy have already quietly packed their bags and moved their futures to a parallel, invisible network, what exactly are we left holding?